Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. Our stories today. President Trump says the U.S. is not ready to leave Iran yet, while projecting confidence about the operation wrapping up soon. What he's saying about the timeline and how he's responding to NATO countries refusing to help secure the Strait of Hormuz. Israel says it killed Iran's top security chief and a commander in overnight strikes. It comes as Iran renews attacks on U.S. Gulf allies and oil tankers near the Strait of Hormuz. A lengthy floor debate is shaping up in the Senate as pressure is building to pass the Save America Act. Some lawmakers are pushing to match the 2-month-long debate that led to the passage of the Civil Rights Act. The Department of Homeland Security shutdown has entered its 5th week, and TSA agents have officially missed their first full paycheck. We discussed this with our panelists. A federal judge blocks the health secretary's changes to vaccine policy, including on childhood vaccinations. The health department indicating it will appeal the ruling.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. Our first story, as Operation Epic Fury enters its day 18, President Trump says the U.S. will leave Iran in the near future, but not now, and the administration pushing back on claims made by a top intelligence official who resigned today in opposition to the war in Iran. Joining us now in studio is White House correspondent Iris Tao. Iris, good afternoon. So tell us, what is the president saying about Iran?
Sure. So the president today is really projecting confidence, and not only in the Strait of Hormuz, but also in the overall timeline. He says it won't be too long before the Strait of Hormuz is secure, as the U.S. is, quote, knocking the hell out of Iran's coast. He's also saying that the U.S. will leave Iran, quote, in the near future, but also adding that the timing will not be now. He's also saying that the U.S. has done enough damage in Iran that he believes it would take Iran a whole decade to rebuild. And here's him speaking today with the Irish Prime Minister earlier in the Oval Office. Watch.
If we left right now, it would take 10 years for them to rebuild. But we're not ready to leave yet. But we'll be leaving in the near future. We'll be leaving in pretty much the very near future. But right now, they've been decimated from every standpoint.
And we know that President Trump in recent days has been calling on countries, including China and European countries, to help with the U.S. efforts to secure the Strait of Hormuz. And here are some updates on that. President Trump says while most of the leaders in Europe told them that they support his efforts in striking Iran, but they are just not willing to help. And he's also saying that while he no longer desires help or needs help from NATO countries, the U.S. is taking note in their response this time around. Look.
They agree fully. Nobody said, oh, you shouldn't do it. They would have had a nuclear weapon within 1 month of when we had the B-2 bombers bomb the nuclear potential. I call it the nuclear dust. So I think NATO's making a very foolish mistake. And I've long said that, I wonder whether or not NATO would ever be there for us. So this was a great test, because we don't need them, but they should have been there.
And Ken, Don, to illustrate the point here, Senator Lindsey Graham, who spoke with President Trump earlier this morning about NATO alliance's lack of willingness to help, he says he's never heard the president so angry in his life. And of course, we know that remains to be seen how President Trump will react the next time around that NATO countries ask for help.
And as well, Iris, President Trump announcing today that he's going to delay his trip to China. What he's saying there, what changed?
Sure. So we know that President Trump has a summit scheduled with Xi Jinping, which was going to happen at the beginning of April in just less than 2 weeks. But President Trump today confirming that that trip has been postponed by 5 to 6 weeks. And the White House has been trying to emphasize that this is not because China has not answered President Trump's call for them to help as well in the Strait of Hormuz, but really because President Trump needs to stay at the White House in Washington, D.C. as the war in Iran plays out. We know that, though, that while China's foreign ministry officially has yet to chime in and actually has been been sidestepping question on whether or not they will help Trump in the Strait of Hormuz. The Chinese state media outlet Xinhua actually posted a cartoon today mocking the U.S. effort and calling on countries to help in the Strait of Hormuz. As you can see in this graphic here, on the one side, it seems to suggest that U.S. is asking for help, but other countries saying that this is not our war. So that's the state media of the Chinese government posting that today. So of course, it remains to be seen how that summit will actually play out once and if this war is over with Iran.
Okay, thank you for bringing to our attention this. But there's one more thing here, Iris. A top counterterrorism official in the Trump administration resigned today in protest of the war in Iran. What's the president's reaction?
Sure. So today, Joe Kent, he's the director of the National Counterterrorism Center. He announced his resignation today, saying that he cannot, in quote, a good conscience support this ongoing war with Iran. He himself is a Gold Star family with his wife actually died in the Middle East amid conflicts. And he's also saying that, quote, Iran posed no immediate threat. And that's his assessment. And today we heard the White House, as well as President Trump, really pushing back on that assertion very forcefully, with President Trump saying this today. Watch.
But I thought he seemed like a pretty nice guy. But when I read his statement, I realized that it's a good thing that he's out, because he said that Iran was not a threat. Iran was a threat. Every country realized what a threat Iran was. The question is whether or not they wanted to do something about it.
Of course, we have heard the president saying today again that he believes that if the U.S. had not struck Iran, the Iranian regime would have had a nuclear weapon within a month.
Okay, well, Iris, thank you for keeping us updated.
Of course.
Capitol Hill faces increasing pressure as the DHS shutdown now entering its fifth week, leaving TSA workers and other federal employees unpaid. Lawmakers remain divided over funding, election security, and a potential new DHS secretary. NTD Chris Bob reports.
You tell your Democrats to vote to pay these poor
Let's do it. Let's do it.
No,
Why don't
you do it. I voted for it time and time
A
again.
bipartisan bill to fund just the TSA. Can we do that together?
Not acceptable. How about all the terrorist attacks like we see down on 6th Street? You want those to continue? These people are keeping us safe. Tell the Democrats to vote for funding the DHS.
A heated exchange outside an Austin airport Monday. Video posted online shows Texas Senator John Cornyn and Democratic Congressman Greg Casar capturing the frustration on Capitol Hill as the shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security stretches past 30 days. Tens of thousands of federal employees, including officers of the Transportation Security Administration, are continuing to work without pay, while airport security lines grow longer across the country. Senator Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma is set for a confirmation hearing Wednesday to become the next DHS secretary. Lawmakers remain divided over funding for the department, while Democrats are pushing a bill that would fund DHS without funding the administration's immigration enforcement efforts. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said Democrats will launch a discharge position this week to force a vote on funding agencies including the TSA, FEMA, the Coast Guard, and CISA. Senator Rick Scott posting on X, quote, "The Senate's job this week is to pass the Save America Act and fund DHS. Secure our homeland, secure our elections." House Speaker Mike Johnson writes, quote, "Agents are forced to work without pay, struggling to support their families, and so far 300 have quit. TSA agents are hurting, airport resources are strained, and our national security is being put at risk." Meanwhile, pressure is building outside Washington. In an open letter sent Sunday, Airlines for America, representing major U.S. carriers including Delta, American, United, Southwest, urged Congress to fund the Department of Homeland Security and guarantee pay for federal aviation workers during shutdowns. The airline group warned that airport wait times have already stretched to 4 hours in some locations and cited polling showing overwhelming public support for paying aviation workers during shutdowns. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Chris Bob, NTD News.
And TSA agents have officially missed their first full paycheck. Joining us now to discuss the shutdown of the DHS is Mike Leon, host of the Can We Please Talk podcast and director of strategy for the Free and Equal Elections Foundation. And we have Tony Kinnett, national correspondent for the Daily Signal and host of the Tony Kinnett Cast radio show and podcast. First of all, good afternoon to you both. Always great to see you. Tony, I'll start with you today. So here's what President Trump said about the shutdown yesterday.
The Democrats aren't paying. The Democrats, we have a deal. They just said we're not going to pay. We're not going to do anything, and it's terrible. The Democrats are terrible. You know, it'd be nice to get along, but for years this has been going on, not just with me. For years it's been going on. Different ideology, but also different tactics. It's crazy. The Democrats don't want to pay. These are bad people. These are not people that love our country.
Okay, Tony, your reaction.
Well, I mean, the man's got a pretty decent point here. I mean, and when you see 4 Islamic terror attacks in the last 3 weeks, you see even Elisa Slotkin from Michigan making it perfectly clear it's time to fund the Department of Homeland Security. It's not time to do little piecemeals and carving it up like a turkey, because this one little group that's, again, already funded through 2027 to 2029 based on the funding model, they don't like that ICE is enforcing the law. They said, we don't want Kristi Noem. Okay, Kristi Noem is gone. We want body cameras. Okay, you can have body cameras. Okay, well, we want no administrative warrants. Sorry, the Supreme Court of the United States has already upheld administrative warrants alongside judicial warrants. So there's no reason for this holdup other than that they're grumpy. And their grumpiness is costing Americans their safety. It's costing, of course, those serving in, for example, the TSA, their pay. And it's also reducing their effectiveness to operate at capacity. And this is going to cause Americans a lot of heartburn, as we're already seeing some of the polls bear out. So again, when the president makes that claim about Democrats, it's pretty easy to see where he's coming from.
Okay, Mike, please respond.
Yeah, thanks, Don. I mean, that's one way to look at it. This is what I was thinking about earlier today. First off, good to see you guys as always. You know, if I was constructing as a defense counsel, let's say, for example, and I was constructing an argument, I would say Tony's going to come on here and give you the conservative opinion, right? He's going to repeat something that Donald Trump said about the Democrats are radical and they're causing this government shutdown. And you think I'm going to give the Democratic position, but I'm not a Democrat, not a registered Democrat. I'm not a liberal. So those of you in the comments on NTD's web pages, I'm not a liberal. What I am going to give you is numbers. I'm going to give you data of TSA agents in the last time this happened, over 1,100 or so that didn't return to work. So we're going to have true impacts to this when this does happen. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, the Republicans control the House. The Republicans control the Senate. They control the executive branch at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and they control the judicial branch. And unfortunately, right now, we have had 2 American citizens that have lost their lives because of what happened with immigrations and customs enforcement. Tony is semi-right about the judicial and administrative warrant part. The point is the enforcement of administrative warrants, they are not the same as judicial. And what we have seen, like I said, play out in Minneapolis and with respect to some other cities, what we saw in Nashville with this reporter from Univision over there, there are some things with immigrations and custom enforcement that need to be reformed. Now, does that mean we need to hold the government hostage, especially TSA, during, you know, spring break weeks and peak travel seasons and kind of risk airport security? No, it doesn't. But that doesn't change the fact that Republicans do control the levers. And if they know that Democrats want this certain thing piecemealed out, and Democrats like Patty Murray from Washington have already outlined ways to fund the TSA, ways to fund other areas of DHS, especially FEMA and things like that as we head into hurricane season, those things should be already looked at, should be talked about on the Senate floor, and there should be some type of compromise. To blame Democrats only for this mess is what's wrong with this country right now. We shouldn't be blaming one party that is in the minority. We use the words majority and minority for a specific reason because it's based on numerical data. One party is in the majority, that is the Republican Party. They control the levers of government. So they are the ones that are supposed to lead from the front on this, because I was told throughout 2024 that the American people voted on this and wanted to change to a more conservative style of government. So if that's the case, it's time to get along, play ball with each other, because I'm flying on Monday to New York, Don, and I don't want to be impacted by all this.
You have skin in the game, Mike. So Tony, let me get your response here. What's Republicans' responsibility here?
Well, I think that I really do agree with Mike on that both parties share responsibility for this. And if we're going to play a simple majority and minority style response here, fine. Filibuster be damned. Let's go ahead and cut it loose. Let's just go ahead and push everything through 51 to 49 and just go ahead and shove those things through. And if the Democrats want to win a majority, they can win a majority. Again, words like cloture are also rather important when we look at the rules set up in the Senate. But I think that if, again, as Democrats have promised to do in every single campaign, except for the now no longer in the, well, for some in the Democrat Party, if we're talking about Joe Manchin, but Kristen Sinema as well, no longer in the Senate, more moderate approaches from the left are not coming. Again, James Tallarico putting on a moderate face and bringing forward as radical a policy suggestion as he can possibly push out. If the Republicans are going to fend that off, then all right, fine. Pass it with a 51 to 49 majority if that's the way forward. But again, I think that more importantly right now is getting the Department of Homeland Security open. This is a time when America is under national security threats. This is a time when, of course, the inconvenience of having to wait at the airport is frustrating. I understand that. That's not something to be taken lightly. But again, TSA, their primary responsibility is to ensure that travel safety, especially through airports, doesn't fall into horrible terror attacks. They're to keep us safe from those specifically. And they're not operating at their full capacity. And regarding the Patty Murray legislation, when you poison pill your own legislation, it often doesn't pass. Republicans are just as guilty of that as Democrats, but partisan theater is going to be partisan theater. It's as obnoxious as seeing two representatives or senators argue outside an Austin airport.
So, Mike, Republicans are in the majority, but it's a slim majority. Republicans don't have the votes.
Yeah, no, they don't. And by the way, to Tony's point, I am not big, I shouldn't say I'm not a big opponent of nuking the filibuster and having simple majorities. Because again, if you were duly elected to those numbers, you should be allowed to enforce the legislation that you want to, because elections should have consequences at the end of the day. So you're not going to see me if tomorrow John Thune changes course and says, you know what? I've got the votes. We're going to nuke this puppy. And now we're going to start passing legislation and get, the last few years of the Trump administration, things that are going to get passed through, depending upon obviously what happens in the midterms. And he decides to do it because that's the other part. That's the other part of the reason why he's not doing it, Don. He knows that in November, January of next year, this could all come back, a full circle. And now Chuck Schumer would be in the majority and not the minority if we keep using those terms. So, but I'm not that big of an opposition person to that. I didn't like when Sinema and Manchin wanted to keep the whole, and I'm using like stuffy language right now, of like the back in the 1700s of when this all started. Like, if you got voted into the majority, that means that the majority of Americans, even if it's the simplest of majorities, 77 million to 75 million, you still won based on that total. So you should be able to get your legislation through. But to your point, Don, they don't have the numbers, which means that outside of that Austin airport exchange, what they should be doing is back in D.C. talking about, okay, meet me halfway on this, because we have, like I said last time, 1,100 or so TSA workers that didn't come back to those roles. That means you've got to backfill. Look, my brother-in-law is a TSA agent. He moved over to a different agency over the last year. So I know about this firsthand because every time there's been a government shutdown, he's the first person I text. And so I know how this impacts them. And I know the rigorous work that they go through. I live right here by Miami Airport. Like I said, I am flying Monday, an early flight, and forget about the travel impact that it has. To Tony's point, it's the security impact that it has. And we've already seen threats different places in this country, whether it be a synagogue in Michigan or a church, whatever it was. Like, there's other threats that have happened, Mamdani and the attack that happened in New York City. This country right now is on high alert in a lot of different areas. And the last thing we want to be without is resources to one of the agencies that's meant to protect us in the air.
Tony, where do you see Democrats and Republicans meeting halfway? What is the path that you see to overcome this deadlock?
Well, I think that you're going to see more individuals like Elisa Slotkin that cave, because again, to the point, Republicans don't have the numbers to beat cloture. So therefore, it is Democrats who are saying we are not going to fund the DHS. And then they have a list of reasons that they're playing hardball on. And those list of reasons better be good enough for the American people to agree with you. According to the polling data, it's not. Currently, what you see in the general congressional ballot are numbers starting to drift away from the Democrats' exciting lead in the beginning of the year. That's getting closer and closer. Now, I actually think this is going to play out as the most unenthusiastic midterm of all time, because guess what? Congress sucks. But in that particular frame, the Elisa Slotkins who want to portray themselves as moderates Well, you don't get to say you're a moderate and then again amid a record number of Islamic terror attacks in 2 weeks when the mayor of New York City is just encouraging all of the Islamic terror that he can, and then the rest of that radical wing whitewashing the terror, saying that you stand alongside these people in keeping the DHS shut down. That's not going to play. And that's not only just going to not play well in North Carolina and in Michigan, that's going to really start to eat into some of their more contested races in what are supposed to be lean blue districts. So they're going to have to make the decision. Is the reasons good enough? Is it strong enough to keep DHS closed? I doubt it. I think Fetterman and Slotkin are going to convince more to probably join them in flaking.
So, Mike, can I get your reaction to this? Senator Eric Schmidt said that Democrats are more focused on defunding ICE than keeping the American people safe.
Yeah, that is a very good point. Let me see. How do I handle this? I'll give you a specific race just because I happen to know one of the persons running in it. So Representative Seth Moulton, who I've mentioned on this show, who's a friend of mine, he's challenging Ed Markey, right? Ed Markey is about not defunding ICE. We need ICE in some form or existence, whereas Seth Moulton is all about abolishing ICE, right? So you do have right now a wing of the party that wants to abolish it and remove it operations-wise. I think I mentioned this recently because we had Senator Ruben Gallego on from a border state who's like, ICE as constituted should be reformed. He's like, it doesn't make any sense to say the words abolish ICE because we need somebody that's actually enforcing immigration laws. Like this is not a Republican or Democrat thing. This is like we need these people. It's kind of like if you fire somebody in programming and then you fire the whole department, then you realize, wait a minute, who's going to schedule all this stuff? We need somebody here in programming. So whether you call it programming or you call it something else, you still need somebody in the department physically. So should Democrats be saying that or stuff like that with respect to, I mean, if we're going to talk about the midterms and the broader outlook, probably not, but I think there are bigger issues right now because the candidate who is now president at 1600 Penn ran on no new wars and I'm going to bring prices down. Prices are higher, gas is high, and we're at a war. So like those are things. Tony said it's going to be uneventful. I wouldn't say all that, Tony. I think this is going to be one of the most watched events with respect to the midterm if we keep going in this trajectory because, like I said, we've had higher prices and we're currently at war. We don't seem to have an end in sight unless we do something similar like we did in Venezuela, where we just say, oh, well, we took out the leader and now we're just going to leave it there. It creates a vacuum. It creates a trickle-back effect. And then all of that plus rising prices at the pump, things like that, that's going to come home to roost for one political party in this country. So I don't think it's going to be as uneventful as maybe Tony. Maybe that's not what he meant. Maybe he meant something else, Tony. I'll let you clarify. But I think that Democrats abolishing ICE is probably a little bit further down the totem pole than it was 2 months ago, 3 months ago when Tony and I were talking because of what's happened in the Middle East.
Okay, Tony, would you like to clarify?
Yeah, sure. So when I say that the Democrats bring the circus and Republicans bring excuses, people aren't going to come out to vote for that. The rebuke that is expected is not bearing out in the polls. And I think that maybe you'll see a slightly more excited primary. Maybe the data has not necessarily shown it so far. But when you actually get into the general election, I'm not seeing the masses come out in favor of re-electing or electing new Democrats who, again, are not proposing anything to cut costs. They're not proposing anything, nothing at all, no plan put in place. Republicans aren't doing that either. They're just saying, just trust the plan. So at the end of Q2, I think we'll get a clearer picture. But if not, then you're just going to see, again, excuses versus the circus. And as we've seen in every Arizona election, that doesn't really play well for turnout.
Okay, Mike, let me give Tony one more comment here because I want him to respond to something. Tony, so there was a proposal yesterday. Democrats proposed a partial DHS funding bill to reopen the TSA, FEMA, and the Coast Guard. Why didn't Republicans vote for that?
So from my understanding, and there's been about 5 of these particular bills, some on the House side, some on the Senate side, a few of these did have poison pills in them. So this is a constant stream of expectations when it comes to the House or the Senate, in which you say this is the Save All Puppies Act, and then about 3 paragraphs down, then we're going to kill all the kittens. This was not just a clean, only funding these particular measures style bills. There were other things in them. I don't have that list in front of me. I can gladly bring that up for our conversation next week. But a series of poison pills is what kills these particular things before. You heard Cornyn alluding to that when he was questioned by Cesar in that video at Austin Airport. Again, I don't have that list of poison pills because there's been 5 of these bills, some on the House side, some on the Senate side, and they all contained different poison pills. None of them were just clean, here you go, presto, it's funded.
Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
No, Tony's right. And this is part of the reason why people hate politics, because what happens is, from a messaging standpoint, the Democrats will run and say, there you go, Republicans, we had 5 different times to pass this and it was clean. And to Tony's point, it wasn't clean. What does clean actually mean? And now you can easily go out there and campaign and say, look, we're trying to fund the government. We don't want this shutdown. And this is how we introduced it. Like I mentioned about Patty Murray. And then you have the same thing with Donald Trump saying that Democrats are obstructionists and they're taking the whole thing down with them, which, like I said before, they're the minority party. So how can they do that? So there's a perfect example. I don't have anything to retort or add to Tony's thing. He's right about that. There were some things about it that were poison pills for sure.
Yeah, Tony.
In itself, for the Republican, Senator Eric Schmidt of Missouri is attempting to do a poison pill thing on behalf of Republicans that Democrats are going to reject. So it goes both ways all time.
Okay, Tony, how do you feel about some of the Democrat demands like identification? You mentioned no masks, judicial warrants, but what about operations? No operations at schools and churches.
So as far as operations at schools and churches, I want to see what the reason and the rationale behind these things are. Judicial and administrative warrants, if the individuals, again, are being arrested, which commit extremely violent crimes, if you can run into a school and trespass, which is we've seen in 2 cases, one in Wisconsin and one in Illinois, well, that's a serious security issue. And state law in Illinois technically forbade that. But then federal precedent carried over due to kind of the imminent threat law that it cuts into. When you start issuing those kind of restrictions, law's not written like clean blocks. It's written like spaghetti. One noodle weaves in and out of all other different kinds of things. It'd be very hard to push that into an effective policy, no matter what law enforcement agency or group of people you're talking about, especially given that in immigration, we didn't even have immigration originally set up for a court system. You were shown here to be illegally, and then you were shown the door. So to kind of set that up at this way, it would take an entire college full of legislative writers to finagle something around in that way. As far as the mask and identification thing, there was an argument that, yes, law enforcement needs to be identifiable and they need to be clearly marked, but also given the 8,000% increase in violent attacks, given the doxings that do result in political assassinations and attempted assassinations, the ICE facility, of course, in Texas, the 8 terrorists who were just convicted, that's also a significant concern. And when we see people's families that are come after, because there might have someone or their church come after, because they say, oh, this pastor's an ICE guy, we're going to storm the building. You're not really making a good case as to why those that are enforcing federal law enforcement need to show their face, identity, and home address to everyone walking by.
So, Mike, I asked Tony this, but I don't think I asked you. But what do you think is the path to reopening the government or the partial shutdown, lifting the partial shutdown, opening the DHS, the path for Democrats and Republicans?
Well, I think it's a little bit of what Tony and I have been mentioning in this segment, but I also think it's, Don, how do I put this? Common sense. So common sense lives in the fact that, to Tony and I's both points, right? We need these agencies. We need these agents to be able to do their job. We're going to be coming into a peak travel season with respect to TSA. Airports and airport security should be a top priority. You see FEMA here in the B-roll that's playing. Obviously, when disaster strikes, this is the agency that's in charge of helping these things. So how do we keep those properties funded while also talking about the certain things that immigration's custom enforcement should be doing that are akin to what local, state, or even other federal police forces that we have, FBI agents as an example, even though they don't carry body cameras and things like that, depending upon situation. How do we mirror those things and either table those things so that way we can extend this out, 45 days, 60 days, whatever it is from the resolution standpoint, to be able to make sure that even though we're kicking the can down the road, there's a light at the end of the tunnel where the can's going to go through. And I don't think we have that in American politics because what you just played at the beginning of this segment was from 1600 Penn saying that Democrats are everything to blame. What you've seen from Tony and I are there are some ways that we can concede about certain things. And yes, Republicans do this. Oh, yes, by the way, Democrats do this. And it goes back to my whole, analogy about roughing the kicker and running into the kicker. So how do we get common people like Tony and I with R and supposed D's next to their name to come together to vote in that majority that you need to pass something? I don't know how that comes to fruition unless, to Tony's point, there are some more Dems that cave and say they make some backroom deals that we've gotten some assurances about ICE coming down the road, and we'll be able to tackle that once we get this prioritized in terms of funding the TSA and DHS overall. I don't know how we come to that common road, because Tony and I, throughout the duration of the two of us doing this segment, we keep coming here where there's continuing resolutions, there's the government being shut down to some measure because of some department and agency, and because there's no common road, or how do we have a win-win here so we can both go out to our constituents base and say, okay, we've got government funded, and now we've got those employees that are funded. Oh, by the way, in Democrats, we've got to compromise on ICE, and they're going to do X, Y, Z. We haven't had that in the duration and the long time that Tony and I have been doing this segment. So I don't know how it comes to a halt, Don.
Well, all right, let's leave it there for today. Very intelligent conversation. Thank you. Thank you both, and happy St. Patrick's Day.
Great to see both of you.
See you guys.
Israel says it killed Iran's top security chief and a commander in overnight airstrikes. It comes as Iran renews attacks on U.S. Gulf allies and oil tankers near the Strait of Hormuz. More news after this. Stay with us.
Shenyun Creations, the streaming platform from Shenyun, featuring world-class dance, past programs, and all original music. Masterclasses, behind the scenes, comedy, and more. Explore shenyuncreations.com.
Hi, I'm Susan Lucci. You may know me from my many years on television. I never thought about heart disease until I had my own heart event. I felt this slight pressure on my chest, just slight. I thought, oh, it's nothing, it'll go away. I didn't get it. I did not get it. A few days later, while shopping at a boutique, that pressure returned, much stronger. It felt like an elephant pressing on my chest. I had a 90% blockage in my main artery and a 75% blockage in the adjacent artery. I was rushed into surgery where I received 2 stents in my arteries. Stents developed through research funded by the American Heart Association. Those stents saved my life. That's why I'm in front of you today, asking you to join me in supporting the American Heart Association by becoming a monthly donor. Call now or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help fund the next medical breakthrough. Get the next person trained in CPR, the next hospital certified in high-quality cardiovascular care. I'm so grateful to the American Heart Association. Their research helped save my life. I can enjoy life with my children, my grandchildren, and my friends. Heart disease is America's #1 killer, and your support now can help save your life or the life of someone you love. Give $19 a month with your credit card, and we'll send you this special t-shirt that you can wear to show that you are helping save lives. Please, listen to your heart. The only reason I'm here today is because I did.
Please call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org. Become a monthly donor during February Heart Month, and your first month's gift will be matched.
Thank you.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune is speaking to the press before the key Save America Act vote. Let's listen in.
Week on the Save America Act. And obviously the message that came over from the House includes a couple of key components, one of which is that you have to prove citizenship to be able to register to vote in this country. And the second component is that you actually have to show an ID to vote in this country. We think those are both things that are overwhelmingly popular all across this country, no matter what your political party is. And to sort of illustrate, I think, how this issue is something that a lot of people resonate with and connect to, is the fact that pretty much everything you do in your daily life involves showing an ID. You know, whether it's opening a bank account, you know, getting a hotel room, picking up prescription drugs. You need a card in many cases just to get into a library. I mean, these are things that are just basic, fundamental aspects of our everyday life. We certainly ought to be able to apply them to something as important as voting in this country. And if you think about it, even the Democrats who are complaining loudly about this required a photo ID to get into the Democrat National Convention. And there are a number of our colleagues, Democrat colleagues on the other side of the aisle, who require a photo ID just to attend their official events. So these are issues that are overwhelmingly popular with American people, as is the issue of ensuring that biological males cannot compete in women's sports. We think that is also a no-brainer. It defies common sense not to agree with that, but that is an issue also that we intend to have a conversation about on the floor in the next few days, and we'll look forward to putting the Democrats on record and showing just the lack of common sense that they apply to some of these basic issues where the American people agree with us. So it'll be an interesting debate, and we are starting. We'll get on that bill this afternoon. We'll pick up the message that came over from the House and start that conversation. And I'm looking forward to a vigorous, long, and spirited conversation on the floor of the United States Senate about these important issues. Senator Barrasso.
10 million illegal immigrants flooded into our country while Joe Biden was president and the Democrats were in charge in the United States Senate and House. And now the Democrats want those same illegal immigrants to have an impact on the elections in the United States. I believe only citizens of the United States should be allowed to vote in American elections, and I believe you should have to present a photo identification card in order to vote. It's common sense. You need to present a photo ID to buy a beer, to board a plane, and to do so many other things that are part of American life. Why not to vote? And the great number of American people agree completely with this, that you should have to have a photo ID and be a citizen in order to vote. The Save America Act is the best way to secure and safely provide elections that represent the viewpoints of the American people. And yet the Democrats in this chamber are going to come to the floor, and each and every one of them is going to stand with the far left, the extreme members of their party, who oppose voter identification with a photo ID. We're going to put every one of them on the record so that everyone in America knows that Republicans support voter ID and Democrats are the party of open borders and illegal voters.
Leader Thune? Go ahead. Senator Cameron. I'm sorry. Okay. That's right. Leader Cameron.
Yes, there we go. Well, I'm really going to start out on a lighter note since it's March Madness. And for the men's and women's basketball teams, exciting. I'm a big basketball fan. But I did want to lord it all over you, and there are probably a few others. But my men's team is number one. That's the Duke Blue Devils. For all you Duke haters out there, just watch. We won with 60% of our team the tournament. I am a little worried about that. You knew who to root against, I guess, is what. But anyway, I just wanted to add my voice very quickly to the Save America Act. I come from rural America, West Virginia, where we have a great sense of accountability, fairness, and just common sense. And it's common sense. We already have a voter ID law in the state of West Virginia. It's easy. We have. It's easy to vote early with it. However you wish to vote with your voter ID makes a lot of sense, and it makes sure that whoever's presenting presenting the ballot is actually that person, and it eliminates the fraud. On the non-citizens voting or illegals voting, to me, that is, if it's a 90%, it should be 100%. Voters, the precious right to vote in this country is something that's earned as an American citizen. Sometimes it's earned at birth, and other times it's through naturalization. And so I think that we ought to respect that, and the common sense tells me that a proof of citizenship does just that. So I look forward to the debate today and through the rest of the week, and however long it takes, because this is an important issue to the American people because of that fundamental right to vote that we all share.
Leader Thune, good afternoon. At some point, I'm told you are going to move to end debate on this. That means 60 votes. We don't have 60 votes. Why go through this? Is this basically just a show?
Well, I mean, we don't know that we don't have 60 votes yet. You're making an assumption.
Multiple members of your conference say that there aren't even 51 votes.
Yeah, well, and you're making an assumption that at the end of this debate that none of the Democrats will be won over. And I'm not saying that I appreciate your skepticism, but I think it's an important debate to have because it is an issue that is at the very core of elections in this country. And I think this is something that the American people care about, something that we've obviously heard a lot about from constituents across this country, and I think it's an important debate to have. So how it ends remains to be seen. There will be a point at which it will end, and there will be a series of votes that come with that. And but at the end of the day, I just don't know how you defend a position that you need to be a citizen in this country, not only to register to vote, but also to be able to show an ID when you vote. And we'll see how long the Democrats want to defend that position, and maybe none of them will be won over at the end. That's entirely possible. But I think the having the fight, having the debate on the floor of the Senate is important.
There a number of military analysts have suggested that the only way to open up the Strait of Hormuz would be for American ground troops to get involved in the fight in Iran. If it requires that step, should the president come to Congress for authority first? And what is your personal opinion of ground troops being involved in this conflict?
I think right now the president is well within his authority. Even if you accept war as powers as being constitutional, he has 60 days to, and I think they've had a lot of success in achieving their objectives. And I think that you will continue to see those objectives achieved. If you talk to our military leadership, our war planners, I think they're doing a masterful job of taking out most of the Iranian military capabilities, whether nuclear or conventional. The Strait of Hormuz, obviously, is an issue that we're all paying a lot of attention to. But I feel confident that the administration and those who are leading our military efforts there ultimately will be successful in getting things opened up there.
Do you think ground troops are necessary? Would you support
I'm not ruling anything in or out. I think that's obviously a decision that ultimately our war planners have to make, but I don't believe, at least from everything I've been told, that that's something that is being contemplated. But Senator Cotton is the chair of our Intelligence Committee, and you want anything you want to add?
I would just say that it's been an extraordinarily successful campaign over the last couple of weeks. Our military objectives are being accomplished day after day. It's a methodical and deliberate effort because it's a very big country with a lot of weapons. But anyone who says that we're already losing or we're in a quagmire or the president can't succeed because of the threat that Iran poses to the Hormuz right now is akin to saying Eisenhower is losing because he hadn't made it to Berlin within 2 weeks of D-Day. It's going to take some time to achieve those military objectives, but in the end, we will have defanged the Iranian regime. Their missile forces, their drones, their missile launchers, their manufacturing capability will be ended. Their nuclear program will once again be pulverized. And specifically with the threat of Strait of Hormuz, it's understandable that we had to prioritize the long-range weapons first that could strike into Europe, or the Indian Ocean, or our bases, or Israel and Arab nations. The weapons that can threaten Hormuz can be fairly crude and rudimentary rockets, for instance. There'll be a time for those, and that time is coming. And like the president said, we shouldn't rule in or out any option, but obviously it was a very carefully planned operation, And I commend the leaders of our military and our operational commanders and the troops who are executing it to a T every single day, reducing Iran's military power to rubble.
But, Senator Khan, can I ask you, you have advocated for this operation to wrap up sooner rather than later. Do you still hold that opinion, and what do you put that into context for us?
I'm not sure I've advocated for it to wrap up on any specific timetable. I've said that based on my conversations with the president and my understanding of Iran's military capabilities, I would expect it to take weeks, not days. And we're only a couple weeks into it. And again, every single day brings hundreds, if not thousands, of strikes into Iran that steadily and methodically degrades their military. And the end state will be a country without the defensive or without the offensive capabilities to continue to terrorize the United States, Israel, our Arab friends, and the civilized world.
Leader, floor time is the coin of the realm. Right. How does it help you if you are using up valuable floor time by having an extended debate on this issue, the SAVE Act, when you have other consequential legislation to deal with, such as a war supplemental, maybe a farm bill, other things that the country needs to have addressed?
There are other things that we will have to deal with, but we have a window of time here. And obviously we slotted this in after passing the housing bill, which was a big bipartisan win last week, got almost 90 votes in the United States Senate. So there are other issues, as you point out, potentially supplemental. We haven't seen that yet, but there is a farm bill. There's permitting reform. Senator Capito will be in the lead on, possibly market structure legislation dealing with digital assets. Could be a farm bill, highway bill. There are a number of things that we can do, and I hope we will be able to do. But we have a unique moment in time here right now to address an issue that there is a great deal of public support around, and I think it's an issue that's really fundamental and important to free and fair elections in this country. And so we're going to continue to have that debate.
One of your members, Senator Mike Lee, has suggested that Republicans who don't support a talking filibuster to pass this should be replaced or primaried. What's your response to him, and what do you make of his tactics around this bill?
Well, again, I'm always, I prefer to have our fights with Democrats. I'm always someone who believes that it's far better for us to have a majority in the United States Senate, and to have a majority. There are certain places where you don't, the same Republican in Arkansas, for example, is not going to be the same as a Republican in Maine or someplace in New England. So obviously we're not going to agree on every issue, but I think on the core issues, you kind of come back to the Reagan doctrine and recognize that somebody is with you 80 or 90% of the time. I think most of our colleagues vote with the president north of 90% of the time, are allies. And so we may not agree on everything, but I'm way more in favor of ensuring that we have Republicans holding these seats in the United States Senate than handing them to Democrats. Yep.
Why is the filibuster more important than stopping illegals from voting?
Well, look, I mean, I think that there are many ways in which you can stop illegals from voting, and a lot of states have some of those measures already in place. But I do think the filibuster, or maybe more specifically, the concept that the founders had for the United States Senate was that there would be one body that was majoritarian and one that wasn't. And so they divided power in a way that enabled the United States Senate, in which we have 6-year terms, staggered terms, more of a methodical way about going about solving the country's problems, and generally in ways that ensure that there are bipartisan majorities in which to accomplish that. So, and frankly, I mean, I think most of, I can't speak for all of my colleagues, but a lot of our colleagues believe that many of the things that Democrats want to do, and when they tried to nuke the filibuster a couple of years ago, were all things that we don't want to have our fingerprints on. Whether that's adding D.C. and Puerto Rico as states or expanding the Supreme Court. You can go right down the laundry list of nationalizing elections. You can go right down the laundry list of things that I think there are a lot of myself and my colleagues have grave concerns about if the Democrats ever had that power handed to them. So it's throughout history, it's protected Republicans and conservative priorities and principles a lot more often than it's protected Democrats.
So illegals voting and the other things that are in the Save America Act do not approach an existential threat to our democracy. It's just something that can be casually dealt with, not worth losing the filibuster.
I don't think it's being casually dealt with. We're going to have a spirited debate on the floor here, and as I said earlier, states have the authority to do this already. My state has those requirements in place. So this is a way of ensuring at the federal level that we have a requirement that if you want to vote in this country, you have to register, and you also have to have an ID to vote. But that's something that's done in some fashion in 36 states already. Last question.
For either of you or any of you here, has the White House indicated possible timing on a supplemental for Iran? And when do you think, because you also have to do a floor time if that comes along.
Right, and I haven't heard with respect to timing or what the components of that might be. I don't know if Senator Cotton has heard anything more specifically on that, but there is an expectation, I think, at some point that there may be a request for some additional resources, to enable them to continue to complete the mission and achieve the objectives that they've set out to achieve with Iran. But we'll be prepared to take that at any time that the administration sends it up. We'll certainly give it due consideration. There are other elements and perhaps it might come with that, but we're not fully aware of those yet because we haven't seen anything just yet. But we will consider it in due time when it comes. Thank you all.
And that was Senate Majority Leader John Thune telling the press that they're pushing forward with a debate, a lengthy one, on the Senate floor on the Save America Act. And he says it remains to be seen if it's going to convince any Democrats to vote with Republicans to push forward this act. And he's reiterating that he's against removing the filibuster. And he says it's just common sense. You need ID to do basically a lot of things in everyday life in America, like going to the library, and mentioning that the Democrats, the DNC, if you want to get in there, you need an ID as well. Okay, moving on. Israel confirming it killed Iran's top security official in an overnight strike. Ali Larijani was one of the most powerful figures in the regime. The Israeli military also killed the commander of the Basij forces, the regime's central tool for repression. The IDF saying the unit employed severe violence, widespread arrests, and the use of force against civilian demonstrators. Here's Israel's defense minister making the announcement.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and I have instructed the IDF to continue hunting the leadership of the terror and repression regime in Iran and to repeatedly sever the head of the octopus and not allow it to grow. U.S. President Trump spoke about the high turnover rate of Iran's leadership. When morning breaks, Washington time, we will update him that the high turnover rate continues and is even increasing following the elimination of two of the most senior figures who remained. I was just updated by the Chief of Staff that the Secretary of the National Security Council, Larijani, and the head of the Basij, the central repression body of Iran, Soleimani, were eliminated last night and joined the head of annihilation program, Khamenei, and all the eliminated members of the Axis of Evil in the depths of hell.
Ali Larijani served as the Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council and was appointed to advise Khamenei during nuclear talks with the Trump administration. A social media post from the IDF reads, quote, "During the most recent wave of protests against the Iranian terror regime, Larijani personally oversaw the massacre that was carried out against Iranian protesters." Here's Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
We are undermining this regime in the hope of giving the Iranian people a chance to remove it. It will not happen all at once. It will not happen easily. But if we persist in this, we will give them a chance to take their fate into their own hands. At the same time, we are helping our American friends in the Gulf. I spoke at length with President Trump yesterday on this issue. There is cooperation between our Air Force and Navy, between President Trump and I and his people. We will help with both indirect attacks, which create tremendous pressure on the Iranian regime, and also with direct actions.
The U.S. and Israel are continuing targeting operations. The IDF today releasing a video showing strikes on the Iranian regime's infrastructure in different areas. A new CENTCOM video also shows strikes on Iranian targets. The IDF also saying more troops have joined ground operations in southern Lebanon. The goal is to expand Israel's forward defense and to create an additional layer of security for residents of northern Israel.
Some European leaders saying they're not opposed to helping the U.S. in the current crisis. Iran's effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz is raising oil prices across the globe. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pasdar has the latest.
We are willing to also invest in our relationship in the transatlantic partnership.
The foreign policy chief of the European Union saying the bloc is open to strengthening ties with the US. This after President Trump called on NATO allies to assist with operations in the Middle East. Some European leaders now saying they're willing to help, while adding that they need more information.
We're a small nation, but also we have some maybe specific capabilities we will be ready to offer if there is a need for any kind of support to US or to free world countries as a coalition.
The Estonian official added that, similar to the European Union, they're not opposed to helping if more information is provided. Meanwhile, other European leaders are saying they won't get involved. The Prime Minister of Poland says his country won't send troops to Iran as the conflict does not directly affect Poland's security. Officials from Germany, the UK and others made similar remarks. One of the main concerns at the moment is Iran's closure of the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of all global oil trade flows through. The closure raises prices across the globe. Members of the International Energy Agency agreed to use 400 million barrels of oil stored in reserves across the globe.
This is an important measure because it seeks to cushion market tensions in the face of this temporary situation.
The European Union's foreign policy chief suggested a deal similar to the one reached in the Black Sea in Ukraine, where fighting was ongoing, but international forces managed to reach a pact, allowing global trade to continue. Arian Pasdar, NTD News.
President Trump says most NATO countries have rejected his calls to join U.S. operations against Iran. The president took to Truth Social to criticize the alliance's reluctance. President Trump posting, quote, "I am not surprised by their action. However, because I always considered NATO, where we spend hundreds of billions of dollars per year protecting these same countries, to be a one-way street." The president continued, quote, "We will protect them, but they will do nothing for us, in particular in a time of need." President Trump also said that the U.S. strikes have largely destroyed Iran's military and killed its leadership. Trump adding, quote, "We no longer need or desire the NATO countries' assistance. We never did." The president also criticizing Japan, Australia, and South Korea. Here's the president speaking during a meeting with Irish Prime Minister at the White House.
We don't need help. You know, that war has been long prosecuted as far as I'm concerned, almost from day one. We knocked out many of these things. We knocked out the Navy essentially in a couple of days. But I was surprised to see that NATO, while they agree that it was a very important thing to do, they agree fully. Nobody said, oh, you shouldn't do it. They would have had a nuclear weapon within 1 month of when we had the B-2 bombers bomb the nuclear potential. I call it the nuclear dust. I think NATO's making a very foolish mistake. And I've long said that, you know, I wonder whether or not NATO would ever be there for us. So this was a great test, because we don't need them, but they should have been there.
And President Trump saying he will be doing something with Cuba very soon. His latest comments as the island nation struggles with nationwide power outages. We have more news after this break. Stay with us.
Discover the ancient secret to vitality and longevity with Puretang Black Ginseng. Crafted from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng, each root is carefully nurtured for over 2,260 days, undergoing a traditional 9-round handcrafted process of steaming and drying to unlock full potency and absorption. Experience pure, natural energy with Puretang Black Ginseng. Order now at puretang.com.
Kids love it. Parents trust it. Obviously. Explore GJW Plus Kids Series and Ganjiong Campus courses led by expert educators. This is spectacular. Children will learn values like respect, responsibility, and knowledge in language, science, and more. Wow. All while having fun. Perfect. Subscribe today at GJW Plus Kids, where learning meets fun.
Disasters are not a matter of if, but when. And they're happening in communities like ours more often.
Even before disaster strikes, hunger is already a crisis in America. But a disaster tests the very heart of who we are as a community. Food is scarce. But it's in these moments of crisis that our strength shines through. Because as neighbors, we lead the way forward. Please join with Feeding America, and let's be there for families in crisis. Call or go online to givetofeedingamerica.org. Just